All right. Cool. I've given lectures before. All right. So this lecture is going to really be more interactive than just like sitting and consuming information. I don't have like a prepared explanation for all the terminal Unix and shell based questions that y'all might have, but we're going to walk through whatever y'all have questions about. And I'm recording this and I'll post it later. These are the skills in phase 1 that have to do with the terminal. And then there's also some that say shell. And then there's a little bit of overlap there. I should make this search work a little bit better. So what are people wanting clarity around? Let's just let's collect some subtopics to talk about, and then I'll go through those.
Can give a shell and variables.
What's up?
Like, can you give us a little bit of a thorough explanation of path?
Oh, path. I couldn't understand what you were saying. Cool. Okay. Path. Yep. Great. Anybody else got terminal Unix bash questions?
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you just explain what's meant by can get a shell environment variables value in the terminal?
Yep.
The second one, right under that.
This one? Yep.
Yeah.
We'll cover that one. Cool.
What is the meaning of grep?
Of grep? Grep is a command. Yep. We'll cover grep.
And mock kernel? That's not,
Which one?
it's not on there, but I don't understand in my notes. I have Mac OS X uses mock kernel.
Oh, that's, oh, I don't know what that, okay.
M-A-C-H.
Yeah.
ACH kernel. We'll have to Google that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Yep.
What's the difference between like Zish and like?
Oh, God. Yeah.
Bash,
Very little.
Yep. You might want to start there.
There's
Yeah. All right. There we
the
go.
Thompson shell, there's a
Difference
Bourne
between
shell.
Beach, bash, and shell. That would be a great start.
I just learned all of those.
Suspicious sack.
Command control up and down.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Anybody else?
The difference is case.
No? Okay, cool. If you think of something, yeah.
Analyzing exit conditions that are not one.
Oh, okay. Exit status other than 0 and 1. Cool. Okay. Sweet. All right. Let's talk about bash and Z shell or Zesh or whatever you want to call it. Okay. So let's go over some terms here. We've got terminal, shell, Unix, and bash and Z shell, right? The terminal is this OS X application, iTerm2. That's what a terminal is. A terminal is an application that runs one or more, right? We can have more of these, one or more instances of your shell, okay? Your shell is the thing that looks for commands and tries to execute them. This, I'm using bash. If is going to take your input and handle taking in your input, running a command, and sending you back the output. That's what a shell does. So bash is an initialism or an acronym for born again shell. So we used to have this much simpler shell, and then bash came around and it gave us a lot of new features like colors and stuff like that. There's an alternate shell that you can use called Z shell that a lot of you have been encouraged to set up, and it's just a kind of like a newer version of a shell. Maybe it's got some different ideas about how a shell should work, and it's slightly different from bash. And I actually don't use it, and I don't know a ton about it, but what I do know is that it's an alternate setup to what is the standard, which is bash. Every machine you're going to SSH into, if you make a virtual machine on Amazon or you're using most other developers' machines, they're going to be using bash. Mac OS ships with bash. It's pretty much the default. So if you don't know bash very well, then using an alternative to that, like Z shell, is just going to cause your task of understanding what a shell is and how to use it to just be more complicated, right? Because a lot of the documentation you're going to read on the internet about the shell is going to be about bash, and you're going to have to tweeze those things apart and find Z shell specific things. I don't know of any Z shell feature that any of us need that bash doesn't also provide. I think the main reason folks got set up with Z shell is because it came with colors and stuff. Honestly. But you can, yes, you can change, you can have colors in bash. There are shortcuts, but you
yeah.
can have aliases in Bash too, right? Like you have Z shell came with all these aliases for you, like GS and glog and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whatever those are, and wherever you got those, we can have those in Bash too. Yeah.
So while we're coming up with topics on the list, we talk about how to get Bash and tell me what new branch you're on.
Okay, sure.
As like a thing in the topic.
Sure. How to get metadata in your prompt. We can talk a little bit about that. Cool.
It's easy enough to switch to Bash. You just
So-
have to have Z shell, so might as well use.
Well, so I'll get back to you in 1 second. So thank you. I don't know Z shell. I was not part of encouraging folks to move to it. I know Bash. You need to know Bash. So if you're using Z shell, feel free to do that. And I think it's going to make your task a little bit more challenging. But I highly recommend that everybody switch back to Bash. And if there are things that you want that Z shell was doing that you don't know how to configure Bash to do, let's Google that and try to figure it out. Otherwise, I can help you if you can't figure it out, right? If you need a colorized prompt, if you need get stuff in your prompt, whatever it is, I'm sure we can get Bash to do whatever Z shell's doing for you. POSIX? Oh, man. Pushing my knowledge here. Okay, yeah, we can talk about that briefly. Yeah. I just don't know much about it. Yeah.
We talk about like how to like make it to where you don't have to like put LA or CD within directory if that directory.
So that is probably one feature that Z shell brings that Bash does not, which is the idea that like I could have a directory, and in Z shell I think you can just type the name of the directory. If I could type, and it would go there, and you're not going to get that from Bash. So that is one thing that you're gonna have to use the CD command. But that's another thing where like if you jump on another developer's machine and you're pairing with them and you think you can move around and you forgot the CD command, right? Like you really want to know that CD is the way to get around, right? So how was that funny? Yeah, that's another thing I'll comment on with the aliases, right? Like you've got these Git aliases like glog and GS or whatever, right? Aliases are awesome and they help you save time, right? It's really encouraging to be like, oh, I type this long command, GS, I type get status all the time, I'll just type GS, it's better, right? And that's fine, but just keep in mind that again, if once you start pairing on someone else's machine, if they don't have those aliases, my machine doesn't have those aliases, you're gonna want to at least be able to run the long form actual commands, right? So it might be beneficial for you to type the long commands out now so that you get them in your brain so that later you don't have to look up what was glog doing again, right? Glog is like get log dash dash one line dash dash graph dash dash decorate, right? It's like a long command, right? But I remember it because I've typed it out so many times, right? So I recommend you do that too, is don't use the crutch of aliases until you're certain that you can always remember those crucial commands that you need in case you're on another machine that doesn't have those aliases.
And I request that maybe if you have a good either guide or whatever to set up our Bash, maybe as close as we can. To
Yeah,
what we use.
sure. I don't have that written up now, but that's something I could totally do. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And
One thing that
Yeah.
really appreciate you doing this because the first week I was here, somebody told me to set up Z shell.
everybody,
Phil.
first week was that way.
And I didn't know why. And
Yeah.
So having like
Yeah.
some type of direction saying this is why
Yeah.
you should use that.
Yeah. And I don't want to hate on Z shell. It's a perfectly good tool. A lot of folks use it, and I'm sure it has some features that like I don't even know about, and maybe, but like Bash does so much, you really want to learn it. Yeah.
Can we like? I think you could just write out like if say I sent you like a bunch of those like short commands, could you possibly like create a list that like gives us the long?
It's on your computer. It's definitely in there somewhere. Those aliases are written out in your machine. That's how you have them, right?
I can show you where.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the gym.
Cool.
Oh, just to kind of answer your question a little bit, Brandon yesterday at 6 p.m. he actually is writing up a markdown of it's me, him, and like another person. I can't remember who the third person. Like, Maya, there we go. Of the command, and he's doing it for phase 1 and 2 because he just grabbed all terminal concepts. So I would say Steve Brandon, he had.
You're just talking about the short command,
Mm-hmm. Well, it's shortened command for bash.
So this might be an area of confusion, right? So like both Z shell and bash have aliases, right? And I'm not talking about Git aliases because Git has its own alias system too, right? So like Git st, if you've seen that, is a shortcut, is a Git alias for Git status, right? Those are going to be in your Git config file. You can have aliases for stuff. You can also have aliases in bash or Z shell. So do I have any aliases? There we go. Look, if I type alias, I have all these aliases for stuff. So like Git is an alias for hub, L is an alias for this ls command, right? So I use ll a lot. That's probably one of the aliases I'm actually using as a crutch, which is ls-tbh1-l, right? So like I don't want to remember all that, and I could live without it if I needed to, right? So you have aliases in both Z shell and bash. They should be somewhere in your home directory. So the way both of these work, both bash and Z shell, is when you open a new shell, it actually executes a script or multiple scripts that are in your home directory. So I've got these files in my home directory, bashrc and bash profile. There are different files for Z shell. There's another, they have some other naming convention, but the files in your home directory called bash profile and bashrc are executed every time you open a new shell. And in there you can configure aliases and all kinds of stuff for your shell. You can configure your prompt and all that kind of stuff. And I know that I'm going to have to change my GitHub API key because I'm going to show you my bashrc file, but it's got my private GitHub API key in there. Cool, but we'll get to that. So is that enough for the explaining of bash versus Z shell? Any other questions about that? Yeah.
You said bash RC is a way to see all your aliases.
It's probably in. The aliases for your environment are probably in your bashrc or your bash profile.
go back to like
The tilde, yeah, yeah. So does everyone know what the tilde means?
Home?
Your home directory, right?
No, I
See what? See, it's
cultural thing.
So echo tilde, actually, this does not get sent to echo. This gets sent to echo. So this is an alias. So if I cd tilde, I'm CDing to my home directory.
Not Tilda, though.
Tilde. Tilda. Okay, cool. Any more questions about bash for Z shell? Move on. Sweet. Okay, folks want to talk about path. Path is super important for you to know. Okay, and understand. All right, let's take a look at my path. So there's another one here. Get a shell environment's value in the terminal. Okay, let's cover that too because it's going to lead us into path. So if you type env, what's up? Oh yeah. If you type env, probably shouldn't have this in a video. There's probably all kinds of secret stuff in here. But I know, it's fine. I'll just make sure. Cool. So we see a data structure that y'all should be familiar with, which is a key value pair data structure, right? This is the key, this is the value. Each line here, the left is the key, it's the variable name, and the right-hand side. So my terminal program, iterm.app, right? This has to do with some terminal stuff. The shell that I'm running is bash. You might have it as Z shell here if you're running Z shell, right? So there's all these variables in an environment. We can have, what's up? Type env for environment. Okay, you have an isolated environment for each shell that you have. So if I type export foo equals red, and down here export foo equals blue. I have these two terminals, and I can say echo $foo, echo $foo, and I have two separate variables, right? So each shell has a set of variables that are configuring what's going on, right? One of the variables you might want to know about is it's just called PWD. It's a little weird variable name because that actually stands for print working directory, but this just stores what your working directory is. If I export my working directory is my home directory, it just takes it. That's what it means to be in a directory, is the status of that variable, right? So if I change that variable, that's actually what CD does. Okay, so in both of these, if I cd to my home directory, you can see echo $pwd is going to be different for each of these shells because they have their own variables. That's how the state of your shell environment is stored, is in these environment variables. And the way you can get access to these environment variables is you can do env, but the most common way is just echo them. So we could echo our path and see that in both of these terminals, my path is the same. Yeah? And we can set these variables by saying export a thing to some value. And all the values are always going to be strings. The variables and the values are going to be strings. It is convention that the name of an environment variable is all caps. All caps with underscores is the convention. I don't think it's enforced, though. I think you could have a lowercase. Yes.
So it's automatically streaming
Quotes are optional. So like, when I mean string, I just mean like bash environment variables don't have the concept of any other kind of object. They're not like JavaScript, the language, or other programming. They don't have like number versus string. Not that I'm aware of. So if we say export foo equals, if we wanted it to be something with a space, so if I just said, I think I would just get green, right? So if I wanted this, I would have to put quotes around the value, and then I would get that. Cool. And that's not a string thing. That's a bash thing. Is that like, this is sort of one argument. This is one argument, and this is a second argument, right? But if I put quotes around it, this makes this one argument. Double quotes and single quotes are different in bash, and exclamation point is a special key character in bash. So I think you're right. If you put an exclamation point inside of double quotes, it has a special meaning, and I honestly never use it, so I don't really know what it is. But it does. It has messed me up a number of times. Yeah, it totally will mess it up. Okay, so path. So does that answer this? Any questions about how to get and set environment variables? Sweet. Oh yeah, great, cool. So path. Let's talk about path. So my path in both of these are going to be the same. So if we look at this output, so I'm going to echo path, and I'm going to pipe it to pb copy, which is paste buffer copy, which puts the output, puts the contents of the path variable into my clipboard. So I can just come over here, and I can just paste it now. So pb copy and pb paste are terminal commands that will let you control what's in your clipboard. So if I just do pb paste, paste whatever in my clipboard. If I copy something and do pb paste again, it's whatever's in my clipboard, right? Yes.
You just really casually said pipe it. What does
Oh yeah, piping. What the heck is piping? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't want to go on that tangent right now, but I'll add it to the list, and we'll get there. So all you need to know about this is this output of this, that thing that's printed to the screen. I'm taking that output and I'm sending it to a different command, which is going to put it in my paste buffer so that I can paste it down here. So I know, yeah. Why would I do that? Oh, because I didn't want to have to like see how it's like wrapped around in my terminal. Like I could come here and copy it, but I want the exact same thing, right? So if I just echo it out and then I select it, I might get like an extra new line character at the end or something. And it was just easier than clicking and selecting, right? If you want something in your clipboard, right? If I want the contents of a file in my clipboard, sometimes it's easier to just like cat that file and pipe it to pb copy, and now the entire contents of this file are in my clipboard, right? It's just a shortcut. You don't have to do it that way. I thought it would be fun. But it turns out,
It just stresses it out. That's all.
great.
But it's easier than like
Okay. Let me talk about cat. Okay, but let me keep on path here. So the path is this string down here, yeah? And if we look at that string, it's separated by these colon characters. So I'm gonna select all these colon characters, and I'm gonna break this down to what you should see as an array, okay? This is an ordered list of paths on my system, right? This is where my node is installed. These are relative paths, so these have to do with relative to where I am when I run the command, okay? Then this is my own personal bin directory where I have my own executables that I've written. This is stuff where Homebrew installs things, and the rest of this are just comes with the system, okay?
So this is a Unix file system.
These are Unix file system paths,
Yes, I recognize.
okay? So every executable that's in this directory, so I'm going to ls this directory, is all these right here. Let me make this -1. Okay, so these commands here are available to me. I can run npm because npm is in this directory. Okay, so the way this path thing works is if I run npm, right, how this works is the shell bash is going to take my command npm, and it's going to say, okay, how do I find this thing? And the way it finds it is it looks through the array of paths that are in your path variable. Does that make sense? Yeah? So we take that path string and it breaks it up by colon and it looks in order. So it looks here and it's going to find it here. So I can introspect where bash is going to find my commands by using the which command. So which npm is going to tell me where it found it, and it found it here, okay? Unlike cd, which it found way down here in user bin. So it actually looked in all of these directories and didn't find a cd command. If there was one in there, it would have used it instead. So there's this sort of order. There's this precedence going on with the order in this array of paths. And it walks through that until it finds a matching command. So I probably have Mocha. Probably not. But if I did npm install global Mocha, Mocha is going to now exist in this bin directory. And so if I do which Mocha, now it finds it here, right? So that command didn't exist on my system before. I installed it just now, which created a file in this directory so that when I typed the name Mocha, it looked, and then it found it, and it ran that command. That's how that's what path is used for. It's to figure out how to resolve where commands are so we can run them. Yes?
The paths are always the same. Is there any ever change them?
Well, the path environment variable changes from system to system, and it might change from shell instance to shell instance. Generally, it doesn't. Generally, the path on your machine is going to stay fairly similar. The path on my machine is going to be different, right? It has to be because, like, your home directory is not called Deadly Icon, right? So it's definitely going to change system to system. Yeah, but it probably doesn't change for the lifetime of a shell. But there are some tricky tools out there. If any of you have ever used, like, Node Version Manager or Ruby Version Manager, those tools might change the way your path works to give you different functionality, right? Does that make sense?
I guess
But for the
I feel like that'll be it.
yeah, so we don't have to get into this if this isn't clear, but let's say I have two versions of Ruby or Node installed, right? I've got one in version 1 over here and version 2 over here, right? I might put the path for the files in version 1 in my path. So that means when I type Ruby, I'm using version 1 of Ruby. If I want to switch to using version 2, I'll take that Ruby version 1 path out of my path and put the Ruby 2 in there. So I type Ruby and it resolves to a different place, to a different version. If that doesn't make sense, it's okay. We don't have to cover that. The answer is really that your path just shouldn't change. And all you need to take away from this whole phase one is understanding that you have this ordered array of paths, and that when you type a command, it looks from top to bottom, from beginning to end, for those commands in all your paths.
I have a stupid question.
Does that make feel resolved? Okay, cool.
I kind of have I'm scared to ask it, but it's kind of stupid. I don't get the idea of path to what, path to home, or path to like relative what I'm using.
Okay,
Like, I'm
so like
confused,
the
like path to what?
got it. Okay, so the word path is just what it happens to be called. It could probably might better be named paths or command paths or something, but it's called path, and that's just like that's just what it is. So you just need to memorize that. But each one of these paths, right, is somewhere we can do an ls and look and see that there are commands in here. So if I look in what's in user bin, these are all these commands. You might notice something you've used. There's probably a bunch in here you've never used. So like if I need to use the cd command, it lives in user bin cd, right? So path means where can bash, the shell we're using, look for the command that we're trying to run when we ask it to run a command. Does that clarify things?
Yeah.
Cool. Yes.
Why is there a dollar sign for
Oh, yeah, $sign just means, so if I just did echo path, that's just gonna echo whatever I put in here, right? What is special to the shell, to bash, right? When bash sees $path, it's gonna replace that with the value of that variable. Okay, so if I say echo, hello, $path is fun, right? I get hello, whatever's in the path variable is fun, right? So any of my variables, right? So echo, I am in the .pwv directory, right? Is gonna say I am in the wherever I am directory, right? So it just echo doesn't even receive $pwd. $pwd is a variable that gets the value gets replaced for its value, and then that is what is sent to the command, right? So if I say export, let's see, let's do export lecture directory equals, and I'll do a little trick here. Well, I won't do a trick because you'll just ask me about it. Okay, so now I've got this environment variable. I've got this environment variable called lecture-dir, right? Okay, and that's what it contains. So if I go somewhere else and I say cd $lecture-dir, that's the value that gets sent to cd is the value of the lecture-dir environment variable. That's why I'm using echo to see what they are, because echo just prints out whatever it gets, right? Yeah, I mean, it's just like in JavaScript when we have a variable and we do string interpolation, right? It puts the value in the string, right? Yes.
I think it's convention in several programming languages that a variable is just
Yes, like Perl is like that. Yeah. PHP, I think, has some dollar variables. Even Ruby has some dollar variables, but no one uses them. Yeah. Cool. jQuery is a totally different $sign thing. So they're not the same. You can in JavaScript have variables that have a $sign in their name, but that does not mean that that is not the same. That just means they have a $sign in their name. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
So is it easier to just refer to the $sign inside any shell as a pointer to followed by the variable itself, which holds the
I wouldn't call it a pointer. It's just like it's special syntax, right? Yeah, it's special syntax, right? So echo lecture-dir is just going to echo that string, but if I put this around it, then it becomes a special variable, right? All right. Cool. So the path variable. So now that we know what it is and how it works, how do we modify it? Okay. Yeah. How do you modify it? Okay. Cool. So here, I'm going to make a directory in this lecture directory called custom bin. And inside of custom bin, I'm going to make a command called I don't know, say cheese. And I'm going to make it executable. We'll talk about that later. And inside the say cheese command, I'm just going to put echo I like cheese. Okay, so now if I run the say cheese command, it says I like cheese. Okay, but I can't just run say cheese in my terminal because bash went through and looked in all the directories in my path, and it did not find one called say cheese, and therefore it says command not found. Yeah, everybody follow me so far? Okay, so now I'm going to add this custom bin directory to my path. Okay, so here's my path as it is now, and I'm going to say export path equals, and I'm going to say, let's see, I'm going to give it the full path. So it's going to be this thing, custom bin. So this thing's a little bit long, but you see this long path here? Is that readable? Is that a little bit more readable if I do this? Cool. Okay, so here is, man, that thing is so annoying. So here's our custom bin directory, and here's the path for it. So I'm going to say export path equals, and I'm going to put in this custom bin, and I'm going to do colon, and then I'm just going to do $path. Right? So it's going to take whatever my path is now and add that to this string, and then I'm going to overwrite that with the new path. So the new path is going to be prepended with this path, and then a colon, and whatever's in my path now. Does that make sense? Questions about this?
So if you're not careful, you can overwrite your
Oh, you can totally mess up your path, and then you can't even CD anywhere, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I wanted you to say that one more time. Like,
You want me to say this one more time?
yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we're saying change the value of the path variable, set the value of the path variable, and we're going to set it to this long string here. And as part of that here, before I do this, let me just show you what this happens to. I'll just say echo. I'm going to echo this long string that includes my path, right? So what we have is this new string with a colon plus what was in my path before. Yeah? Just like if I did echo hello from lecturer, we're injecting variables. We're doing something like string interpolation in the shell here. So if we
redefine the variable and then add it in. Okay.
We haven't done that part yet, but we're going to, right? So all I've done is echo things. All I've done is print stuff out to the screen, right? So I'm going to set my path. So I'm going to say export path equals the directory that we want to add to the front of our path, that we want to prepend to the front of our path, and then whatever our path was before. So when I do that, you can see now I'm going to echo $path, and now I have this custom bin directory as the first thing in my path. So if I say cheese, it finds it. Yes?
And if you close the shell, that doesn't, the ending path is gone.
Yes, so for example, if I open a new shell, this is a brand new shell, it's not there, and if I echo $path, I have that same path that I had before.
So if you screw up the campaign path, just slow down.
If you mess up your path playing around with this, export, just resetting the value of path, just make a new terminal.
Thank you.
That's
Best
helpful.
thing.
Yes?
So I know you prepended, but you didn't have the end, you can do the appendage for the.
At the end, yeah, other way around.
You can choose.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there an advantage of doing one?
Yeah, the order matters. The order matters. So here, check this out, right? So now I'm going to make a copy of the say cheese file or executable. Both are true. And I'm going to call it CD. So now if I run CD, it actually still used CD, right? Which is not what I expected and not what I was expecting you to do, but man, that's really annoying. So what would normally happen if there wasn't this caching thing going on is that it would have found CD in my custom bin directory, and said say cheese. But unfortunately, I think the resolution for where it found CD was stored was cached.
Well,
And
that
that
isn't the first place that the terminal looks in for commands. There's something above.
is there?
Yeah,
Okay.
like there's the system
Huh.
like commands, and it'll look there before it looks at things in path.
Okay. Well, let's try a different command that's not so systemy. Let's try like pwd. So custom bin. We'll move CD to pwd. That doesn't work either. Well,
Try Git.
yeah, right?
Like npm might be something.
Sure. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So that was a little convoluted, but what I wanted to show you, your question was, does it matter whether you put the new path that you're talking about at the beginning or at the end? And so if we look at this as an array, it's an ordered list. And it should look in the first one first and the second one second, right? So if I put it at the end, if I put the path to my custom bin directory at the beginning, it should look there first, which means it should override the commands that are below it, right? And same if I put it at the end, anything above it overrides. So it matters in that sense.
In a real world situation, we would use this, just wondering, if like let's say I'm working on a project for somebody and the project has been created through their paths and their shit, and I need to be able to access it. So they give me like, I can override my own.
Sure.
By putting in theirs.
Yeah, I mean, generally you don't need to do that on a project by project basis. Generally, you just need to kind of set up your machine to get files from where they're supposed to get them, right? So for example, here, when the Mac OS is going to ship with just these. These are your these are your standard paths, right? And so I've added these paths to my system because I want access to some additional commands, right? So I just did this once and I generally never change it. I don't need to change it per project or anything. This is just because I want to have access to my node commands. So this is in one of my bash configuration files, is to put my node executable directory in my path. I added these because if I'm in a node project, right, I want to be able to execute the commands that were installed for that local project. So that's why I have this relative thing. We can talk about this more. And then I've got my own custom bin directory where I put my own executables that I share across my multiple machines. So I've got that in my path as well. So does that answer your question?
I just wanted to like understand a real world.
Like, why would you do this?
Yeah. So the easiest one is I have my own commands that I've written that help me do stuff, and so I put those in this folder. You could put a folder anywhere for your own personal commands, and then add that to your path, and now they're available to you. So that's like the main use case. If you want to use nodes globally installed commands, you got to add that to your path. Same thing with other programming languages like Ruby and stuff like that.
Like all my jobs.
Only if those are executables that you want available to you on the command line. Yeah. Like you don't have the path to your globally installed node modules. Yep.
Yeah, and also the one that
This one.
on top. I don't
Yep.
have, I don't know if in my path and yet NPM work.
NPM will work. You can type NPM, but you can't. But if you make a brand new project and say npm install Mocha, and then you try to run Mocha, it won't be there because it's installed in the project directory /node modules /bin. So y'all might have experienced having to type that out, right? If you've got this relative URL in your path, if I type Mocha, it's going to look in the current directory and look for that locally installed version first. At least, actually, the way this is written out, it's going to look for a globally installed version. I should actually probably move this down because I'd rather the local ones be looked in first. Does that answer your question? So this is something I recommend that everyone put this in their path using a bash. If you're using Z shell, you'll have to figure that out. But using your bash RC file to add this to your path so that your project executables, your node local node installs are executable.
The difference is that if it's not in the path, I need to actually type out the
You need to type the full path to the executable. You need to tell bash where it is. It can't find it. Yeah. Did you still have a question?
Yeah, I was confused because it looked like you changed using the export path equals
Uh-huh.
path, but it didn't save into the next.
Correct.
terminal.
Yes, each terminal has its own instance of variables, right? Its own environment, right? So if I what's up? Then you permanently change the path by adding a script that runs whenever you open a terminal, right? So if I open this terminal, the fact that my path got set up the way that it did is because these files, I'll just do it over here. The files in my home directory called, that's not helpful. No way. That's not right. Okay. Oh, I know what it is. It skips dot files. I swear I know what I'm doing. Cool. So in my home directory, I have a file called bash rc and bash profile. And those scripts execute whenever you make a new shell. So let's look at those. God, I hate this thing. Don't mute me. Go away. Okay, so let's edit the .bash rc and the .bash profile. So bash profile we're going to ignore right now. Here's bash rc. There's a ton of stuff in here. Look, my token. And I actually have a lot of configuration stuff going on, and so I've got it broken up into multiple files. But basically, let's just let's comment all this out. Oh, what? Nice. Let's comment all this out. So I commented out everything in my bash rc file. So this shell was already configured. It already ran my bash rc, so it's going to stay configured. But if I open a new shell, look how crappy it looks. And if we look at my pwd, or my path is the standard path that ships with the operating system, right? So I commented out all of my configuration. So now when I open a shell, it runs this configuration file, which now does nothing. And so my path isn't all set up. My prompt isn't colorized, right? So that's how you permanently change your path, is just by changing the essentially initialization script of your shell, right? So if I wanted to add something into my path, like I'm doing down here, I'll pull these up one by one. I'm saying export path equals .bin, .script, .node modules bin. So this is the thing that you want to add to your path. If we want the local node modules bin added to your path, you do that. So now if I open a new shell, I can echo $path. And now it's there. So let's make this more clear. I'm going to echo hello from your .bash rc file, right? So now I'm going to close these extra shells, open a new shell, and we'll see hello from the .bash rc file. So we know this is being run at the very beginning of every new shell.
How did you find this file again?
Which file?
The readme ND that you're using to edit, I guess, bash rc. Oh yeah, you're in bash
Sorry,
rc.
This
Like,
file?
where is this?
This file is in your home directory .bash rc. If it's not there, you can create it.
Okay.
And you can always, if it's easier, you can always like go to squiggly in your command prompt and type Adam dot and like get all of your dot files.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can do that.
That's true.
When you add ./node modules like that to the front of the path, does that mean that it's running every time you do anything in your terminal?
What do you mean running?
Well, I mean, it seems like
Yeah.
the path, anytime you do anything like you were saying, like if I type CD or I type working directory or some other thing like npm, we need to look in path in order to find that command and run that command.
Yes.
So I'm a little confused about adding some random piece of code to the front of the path, because then it seems like when I'm doing things in my computer computer that have absolutely nothing to do with coding in Node.
Yes.
And I'm always running Node modules.
So
Like, is this? It seems like, how is that working?
got it. Okay. So I think there might be a little misconception in here, right? So I wouldn't call this code. Okay. This is just a string that lists places to look. So none of this executes. This is just a variable. Okay. But when I type Mocha, right, and it tries to find Mocha, or if I type which Mocha, right, it's looking in my path. So you're right. If I type the word Mocha from anywhere in my computer, it's going to look through my path, my set of paths here. And if I'm in my home directory, or if I'm in my documents directory and there is no node modules bin directory, it's still going to look for that directory and be like, there isn't one there. I'll go to the next one. And that's okay. It's pretty fast, right? So you don't have to worry about optimizing for looking up commands. It's not hard for the computer to look in 10 directories for these commands, right? So it is always there, but it's just not used when it's not there, right? When you're not in a node project and you don't have a node modules directory, it's going to try to look there, see that it's not there, and move on. So it's going to be okay to have that in there all the time. Does that clarify?
Yeah.
Cool. You had a question.
Yes, is there a reason why you have your bash RC profile symbolic?
Yes, there is.
What is it?
So I have two laptops. I've got my work laptop, my home laptop, and I like to keep my bash environment the same on both machines. And we can talk about this in another time, but I have taken all of my dot files, like this big bash config file that I have, and a bunch of other stuff like my aliases and my custom commands, and they're in a private GitHub repository. And that's checked out in my home directory, and then I symlink from there into to put my bash RC file in the right place. That makes sense? Sure. Yeah, we won't have time today, but we can. Yeah.
What happens if you try to find your bash RC file in your machine?
If you try to go into it,
Yeah, if you try to like.
well, so you can't go into a file. So what do you mean by that?
Oh, sorry. I keep hurting you.
No, it's okay. So you probably did something like this. You probably did this.
That's what I did.
And that says permission denied, right? And that's because you're trying to execute this file. God, go away. Because this syntax tells Bash, I want to run this thing, right? But it does not have the executable permissions because it's not an executable file, right? You want to edit it. So Atom or Sublime, whatever your editor is, to edit that file. You just want to read it. Yes.
That's sort of similar to it. I can't quite remember which file I tried to open. I had opened one particular file or another, and it said permission denied.
So open is probably not the right command. I don't know what open's going to do. Yeah, open is actually like spawning. Open might actually try to execute this file. I'm not sure. The open command is not necessarily smart enough to know that this file needs to be opened in your editor. Open is like the standard operating system. So if it had a file extension, if it had like .txt or something, it might know what to do. But in the terminal, if you want to edit a file, it's best to use your specific editor command, which I have aliased to E.
And it's okay that my bash RC file or my .bash RC file is empty, right?
If it's empty, you just haven't configured your shell at all, right? So
Okay.
you're going to want to go in and add something like this. You're going to want to add colors to your PS1. There's a bunch of other configuration stuff that I'll try to put together my configuration and with some comments as to why I have those things. Because I have a bunch of options set here and things like that. Yeah. I've lost the queue of questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand again. Yeah, right? Put a sticky note on your forehead, and then we will get to you.
I had a question about mock.
I have a question.
Yes.
So let's say like right now your bash RC is empty, and then you create one and you start editing it, and you add all these scripts, and then I don't know, like in the future you accidentally like got into like a different bash RC file.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Got into a different one?
Like let's say you wanted to try to edit it again, and maybe you typed something wrong, and then it found like it created like another bash RC. Is that possible?
Well, I mean, if you created another file, like it's not possible to have two files in the same place. So if you had two bash RC files, you would technically have a bash RC file and some file named slightly different somewhere else, in which case it will be ignored, because the bash shell knows that when you start something, to look in your home directory for a .bashrc file, and if there is one, to source that file, to execute that file. So if you accidentally made a different file that's called bashrd or something, you know what I mean? Like that's just going to be ignored, and you need to resolve that and put the stuff in the right place. Yeah. But that brings me to an interesting question. What if I mess up my file, right?
Yeah.
And then so I'm going to close this second shell, and I'll open a new shell. And you can see I got an error. But it still kept going, right? That's one thing to know about bash scripts. They're not like normal scripts where like you get an error. If you don't configure it correctly, it'll just keep going. It'll just be like, oh yeah, that didn't work. I'll do the next thing, right? So generally you'll be okay. But if you mess up your path, let's say we do some real damage and we just say export path is to nothing, right? So I'll open a new shell, and now my path is nothing. Can I even cd to, can I even do pwd? So some of these commands, like I think you're right, bash has some sort of basic functionality where it's like where it knows even if your path is screwed up, you'll have some basic commands. But I doubt I can type get, or like I can do echo. I can't do npm or node or anything like that, right? So you'll have some basic functionality. You won't have your aliases, right? So I won't be able to do this. I won't be able to do this. I'll have to figure out how to open that file another way to fix this problem. Yes?
So is the only way to permanently modify your path in the script, or can you do the double arrow?
There's actually other ways to modify your path, but this is the recommended way. There's other ways to do it where you can put stuff in files, and there's something called etc path. That's a system-wide thing, but it's just going to complicate things. So I highly recommend that you just start with this approach to modifying your path. And if you get to a point where there's other lower level ways to modify every user's path on the system, right? Or the system's default paths, and we don't want to get into that now. But cool. Yes.
So I was doing some stuff that was changing. I guess my question is, I don't know what words to use when I talk about it. You're like blim blam, Unix, terminal shell, deadly icon.
Ah, yeah. This is called a shebang.
Oh yeah.
So it's hash bang, which is
not there, but like
oh.
in your terminal.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The thing that comes up before, like that ends with the $sign.
So
where it's like, okay, now you can type a command.
This thing is
like
called a prompt.
The prompt. Okay.
Yeah.
So changing the prompt. I think that the tutorial I was following was putting it in the .bash profile as opposed to the .bash
Sure.
RC. So like, what's
Sure.
the difference between those two places?
Yep. I always get this backwards, so I really hope I don't get this backwards. But there are two different ways a bash instance can happen, right? Bash is the shell that runs commands, right? So I can run bash in an interactive shell. You can also run bash in a non-interactive shell. So you can actually spawn bash by just typing bash. And now I'm in a second bash. And if I type exit, I go back. You can't tell the difference because they look exactly the same, right? But bash is a command that you can run that gives you a prompt to run commands, right? And you can just fucking
Keep nesting.
you can just like what's that stupid movie called? Inception. Thank you. You can inception your way all the way down, right? So there's another way to run bash where you can just say, hey bash, run these commands and then exit. So there's an interactive and a non-interactive way to run bash. This is probably more complexity than we need, but all bash instances run your bash RC. Your interactive bashes run your bash profile. So we want to modify your path in every instance of bash, but we only are going to have a prompt in an interactive bash, so we might put that in your bash profile. But the distinction's not really that important. Just put everything in your bash RC and you'll be fine. If you need that distinction, that'll be kind of like a level 2 of understanding all this stuff. Yeah.
Can you go back to where you started about talking about the shebang and like the syntax you're using? In the
Yeah,
bash
we're
RC?
getting off track from the list though.
Oh, my bad.
And we're never going to get to all these things since we have 5 minutes left.
Oh,
but I'll keep this list and maybe we'll come back to it. The shebang. Huh? Yeah, we'll just record this video at one point. Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do. All right. that's probably enough to get you all primed for covering path. Someone wanted to talk about grep. Grep is a command you can Google about. Grep is basically like a filter command for text, right? So if I do ls-1 of my home directory, it lists all my home directory, all my directories or all the files in my home directory, right? So let's say I want to just get the ones that I know have a certain phrase in them, right? So I can take this text. This is just text, right? I can pipe it to like pb copy, right? And then that's just text, right? So I can pipe this to grep, and I can say grep for anything that has a capital P in it. And it takes that text, and it goes line by line, and it says, does this have a P in it? If so, print it out. If not, throw it away, right? So it's a way, so for example, we could cat etc words, etc.
It looks like etc.
Oh, it's commonly called Etsy. I don't know why. These words were indoctrinated in me from older people with longer neck beards than mine. Just like you call it etc. if you want. I don't even know where the dictionary is. Where is the Etsy dictionary or Etsy words? I think. Where is that file? It's in user share dict words. Okay, so there's a file on your computer you might not know about called user share dict words that just has every word. Look at it go.
Every word?
Every word. Probably not every single word, but a heck of a lot of words. Let's find out. Let's cat this file and count how many words. There's 235,000 words in this file. Okay? So let's say we want to look for some words, right? So we're going to cat. Someone asked me what cat was. Cat just takes whatever's in the file and prints it to the screen. Kind of like echo, but for a file, right? So cat is going to just start spewing this file out to my terminal, and it takes forever. So what if I want to find words? What's a part of a word we can search for? Oh,
Yeah,
well,
that
I'll
was
cover
dog.
that. I'll cover that in 1 second. Yeah. So that contain dog. Great. So I'll do insensitive, case insensitive, dog. So these are all the words that contain dog.
So it's our dictionary. You can check our email.
Oh.
You can
Crush on
Bone dog. Boondoggle. Right.
Hey, good password words.
Yeah. Okay.
Change your password.
How about any words that contain word?
So
Okay. So. What is it for, right? I use it every day. Grep is one of the most useful commands. Oh, the dictionary. Why is it there? I have no idea. I don't know why Unix ships with a file filled with 235,000 words. I honestly have no idea. You could totally make a boggle game. You could read about it on Wikipedia. I don't know why it's here. I bet they tell you the history of why this file. Also have no idea. Okay, so grep. We're talking about grep. And we have 1 minute left. So grep, is the utility of grep not obvious by this example? No, okay, great. Cool. So another way we might use grep is I might use the find command. So I'm going to say, so find is an interesting command. I'm going to actually,
I don't know how.
This is where my node modules are installed in my whole system for a specific version of Node. Lib maybe? Cool. So this is a bunch of node modules I've installed globally on my system in this directory. So if I use find, and I give it this path, it's going to just print out a whole path to every single file in that entire tree. It's a ton of things. Oh, I forgot to talk about word count. This is a good place to talk about that. So how many files are in this entire directory all the way down in all subdirectories? we can pipe to word count -L, and that means count every line of the previous input that was sent to me. So find is going to find every single file and print the whole path for every single file. Then we're going to pipe that to word count -L, which is going to count every line of that output. So how many files? There's 27,000 files in my globally installed node modules directory, right? Let's say I wanted to find something in that pile of files, right? I can use find, oops, and pipe it to grep, and I'll do case insensitive, and I'll look for Mocha. And so it printed out the full path to every file in all that directory, and then I filtered down using grep for anything that had Mocha in the name. Let's search for anything that has like, let's search for all the license files. So I'll do grep not case insensitive license. And here are all the license files for all the node modules that I have globally installed. So that's one way that I use grep is I don't know where a file is, but I know part of its name. And so I'll do a find, which prints every single file, and then I'll grep for that part of the name that I know. I also will grep through files. You can, let's say we're gonna grep through this, this README file for parking. So I'll say grep parking./readme, and it'll go find every line in the file that matches. So every line in the file that has an ER just got printed out. So that's the same as if I catted the README file, piped it to grep ER, right? So any string input that you pipe to grep is going to filter line by line and print out the lines that match. Grep can do a lot more things. There's a ton of options. Locate and find are different. Find just manually walks the file system and prints things out. It's a slow process. It's reading everything. Locate is actually a pre-indexed database that your system keeps up to date so that it's wicked fast. So locate may not even be initialized on some machines. You may not even have a locate database. Sometimes I think you have to set it up. I never use locate, but it's way faster because it already looked, basically. All right, there's a lot to talk about. We could totally do this again tomorrow about the terminal and the shell and a bunch more things, which we might do if that's what you want to do for the next lecture, but that's our time for today.
Thanks, Jared.
You're welcome. That was fun.